have now.
I'm a brokerage. We operate on. We don't sell sneakers out of the back of the office. We broker deals, and we get paid on it.
Fair to
the most important part of the sales process. This is really your first substantial contact with your client. And it's important because the more time you spend with your client, the more fact finding you can do. This is when the building rapport starts, and we define building rapport as fact finding, finding the motivating factors for moving forward, and finding any potential holdups as to why they may not be able to make a decision. Now, if you just meet somebody at the property, how much time do you have to have the conversation with them? Well, first of all, you got to greet them, introduce yourself, shake hands, give them some paperwork. They might have a question like in the chamber for you. You're not going to be able to get that in-depth in conversation. The consultation provides additional time for you to do this. So, what was the goal when you first connect with somebody? Do you guys remember this? You get a phone call, email, text message. What's the goal? Guys, somebody should have this answer ready to go. We literally covered this 2 weeks ago. Book the appointment. Okay? Now, from the client's perspective, booking the appointment, you guys should be writing this stuff down. Okay? From the client's perspective, flip the whole packet over and write on the last page. From the client's perspective, booking the appointment is an appointment to see the apartment. From your perspective, booking an appointment is an appointment for you to do a consultation. Now, you're not going to book an appointment to do a consultation with your client because they don't want a consultation. They want to see the apartment. So if you say, when are you available for a consultation? They're going to say, whoa, hold up. I don't want to do a consultation. I just want to see the apartment. Okay, so understand that you're angling this from their perspective. You're selling to them. So you're booking an appointment to see the apartment. Okay, I want you to think about reeling in a fish. You're going to hook the fish, slowly reel them in. Okay, this is what you're going to do. Is you're going to find out when they're free, and then you're going to work on where you're going to be. Time is the most important variable that we reduce here. So as soon as you get in touch with somebody and you get them on the phone, your goal being to book the appointment, I don't like to lead off with what's your schedule look like or when are you free. I like to lead with, are you available this afternoon? Now, oftentimes they're going to tell you, well, no, I'm working this week, but I'm free on Saturday. Well, no shit, okay? But if it's Monday, what's the likeliness this person is going to keep their appointment with you on Saturday? I can tell you, very, very, very low. Which is why, hopefully this ambulance goes by.
I'm gonna go get a working pen.
Yeah, put mine for now. I don't need to write. Which is why you've got to work to book that appointment as quickly as possible. If they tell you they're free Saturday, hey, are you available this afternoon? Well, actually, I'm only free Saturday. Oh, okay, I understand. What's your schedule look like this week? Any chance you can see it after work? Now, if they say Saturday and you say, oh, Saturday won't work, can you do after work today? Just like that, they're probably just going to say, no, I want to stick to Saturday. You've got to do it kind of this off the cuff. Oh, not a problem. Saturday's fine, but is there any chance you might be free after work today? I'm just worried the apartment may not be available on Saturday. What's your schedule look like? Right? You're saying it kind of this off the cuff, and we're going to use that phrasing, that tonality often throughout this entire process. So I need that you guys understand that when you say something off the cuff, people are going to be compelled to answer it, but it doesn't feel as confrontational. So the goal is to book that meeting for today. Now, I want you guys to write down the word call, and then the word consult, and then the word showing. And I want you guys to understand that's the process. The phone call, the consultation, and the showing. The phone call and the consultation are two separate things. And the goal is to reduce the amount of time between the three of these things. And with three things, there's two in-betweens, so that's two time frames that you need to reduce that space. From the call to the consult, would be, are you available this afternoon? Or where are you coming from? I'm free right now, or after work, right? So you want to, as tight as you can get that time frame. The longer it is, the less likely they are to show. Now, from there, your goals are going to be to book them to meet you at the office. Now, if you say, are you free at 2 o'clock to meet me at my office? What do they want to do? They want to see the apartment. So you're not going to say, are you available to meet at my office? You're going to book the time first. You're going to get a little commitment first, and then you introduce the next step, right? Again, we're reeling them in, right? You don't just hook them, pull the string, and they come into the boat, all right? You got to bring them in a little bit by a little bit. So get them to agree to a time, and then you discuss location for that meeting. And we're going to talk about if somebody really won't meet you at the office, but in my experience, I can get 75 to maybe 80% kind of on the low end to come into the office for the first consultation. And Kazi can admit that's how we did pretty much every single client. Yeah, when I was seeing clients, right? Almost every single client sat with me at my desk. And it's not that I couldn't have, by the way, this is a few years ago, it's not that Zoom and FaceTime and Skype and telephones didn't exist then, they did. And at that time also, most other agents were meeting them at the apartment. The difference between me and most other agents is that I understood that they just wanted to meet at the apartment, but I sold them the office meeting. So I want to teach you guys how to sell the office meeting, because the consultation done in person is a fucking 10,000 times more powerful than a phone call, right? Which a phone call is 10,000 times more powerful than a text or an email, right? So I need you guys to see the value in the in-person meeting to be able to sell that to your clients. Okay.
Would the same be true if they want to meet them, but they can't do it all? They would like you to meet them.
Well, this is what I'm saying. We're going to set, if they can't meet with you, okay, let's figure that out, okay? But I'm going to give you guys the in-office consultation and the virtual consultation on Zoom or FaceTime. But again, if they're not here, if they're in Italy, for example, then there's no selling them to meet with you first. However, if they live on the Upper West Side and they just want you to show them the apartment and they don't want to come to the office, then you are not selling it well enough. So you can just sell that a little bit better. Now, once I get them to agree on the time, I usually ask, okay, great, where are you coming from? And now I'm going to establish what I'm up against with how hard I need to sell them to meet me in the office. Now, if the apartment's in Jackson Heights and they live in Woodside, which by the way, those are like pretty close neighborhoods for those of you who don't know Queens, getting that person into Manhattan is going to be tougher than somebody who lives near this area or the apartment is near this area, okay? So I'm asking questions first. Okay, where are you coming from? Before I say, remember they've agreed a time, before I say the place. You guys follow me in this? So I'm evaluating how hard I'm going to need to sell this. From there, I've done the evaluation. If it's somebody in Flushing or something who wants to see in Woodside, I might say, oh yeah, I meet all first-time clients in the office. Is there any chance you might be passing through Midtown? My office is in Midtown. We're really, like 18 to 22 minutes from the apartment, like by subway. But is there any chance you might be able to swing through here? First ask, okay? Now, if they say no, or why, I'll explain. I'm going to try to sell first. What a lot of agents do is they just assume that person doesn't want to, or they're afraid to sell, and they say, okay, I can just meet you at the apartment. But you guys don't sell. You guys need to understand what selling is. It's effectively facing a no and then trying to persuade someone. But if you don't get the no, then you're not selling. And you were licensed by the state of New York to do what? James Bond was licensed to kill. You guys literally have a license to, because you are licensed. No, wrong answer. As wrong as it gets. You are licensed real estate? Salespeople. Thank you, Jason. You are licensed, just like James Bond is licensed to sell. You are not a licensed agent. You are a licensed salesperson. So I need you to understand the core meaning of that state phrase, that state term, is salesperson, is that you are licensed to sell. Which means if somebody's like, oh, he was really being pushy, that's your job. Like literally you are licensed to do that. And in this market, if you are not being a little bit pushy, you're doing your job very poorly. If somebody says, I want to sleep on it, say, great, when are you going to sleep? I'll catch you tomorrow, is the wrong answer. If somebody says, I want to sleep on it, and you say, great, I definitely think you need to feel confident when you make this decision. I'm just curious, what are some things you're thinking about? Now you're selling. See the difference? Most real estate agents say, okay, great, when do you wake up tomorrow? Or, okay, let me know, which is even worse. You need to sell. So you need to understand that there are different factors that are going to affect somebody's decision to come and meet with you in the office. I like to say, great, we can certainly meet at 2 o'clock. I have a lot of new listings that aren't online yet. I'm happy to go over those listings when we meet in person. Where are you coming from? Something like that. Now, I've kind of preempted a couple additional questions. One, I said new listings. That's intriguing. And then I said that aren't online yet. So if somebody asks me to send it to them, how in smoke signals, by carrier pigeon, they're not online, right? So I preempted them saying, can you send it to me? So remember that phrasing. So once you get somebody, any questions or concerns or maybe some objections that you guys have run into trying to convince somebody to meet you in the office before we talk about the actual consultation?
Repeat that question.
I'm ready to talk about the consultation. Just now I was talking about scheduling the consultation and how we'll get them to meet you in person in the office.
Right.
Okay? Now, I don't want to play rest of the fucking owl, which for those of you who don't know, it's let me show you how to draw an owl. First draw the ears, second draw the face, finally, and then you look and it's the whole owl. And you're like, wait, but step 2 to 3, I need more information. I don't know how to draw the rest of the fucking owl.
Can I just say?
Right? So my question is, right now we're moving on to the owl. Okay. Are there any questions that you guys aren't ready to draw some eyelashes as a final step? Go ahead.
With them asking for you to just send them the apartment, because you're trying to draw them in. You say, I have some new things that aren't public yet. Oh, can you just send that to me?
I have a lot of new listings that aren't online yet. I'd be happy to go over those when we meet.
But
Now-
can't you just send it to me?
I just said they're not online yet. So I have a lot of new listings that we don't have on the market. Happy to go over them with you, once we discuss your criteria. But also bear in mind, you're not likely to run into the scenario as often as you think because you're saying this statement off the cuff. But remember, there's one big factor that you're ignoring with that question is they're booking an appointment with you to see one listing in particular. So you shouldn't need to send them anything else. They're already ready to book to see that apartment. Does that make sense?
It
You're
does.
just kind of adding to the pot. And you say, well, look, we're going to go see the one that you said, so I don't, want to make sure that we're not wasting your time. But like I said, I have a lot of new places. Like I don't have an online listing for. There's nothing I can really send you, but I'd be happy to go over them when we meet. Sound good? If you say it like that, nobody's going to say, in fact, June, that sounds bad. Right? They're just going to say, okay, yeah, cool, fair enough.
I was just wondering about people say, well, I don't understand. Why can't you just?
Because if you're doing it correctly, there's one listing they're already booking to see with you. You've now sweetened the pot. I said I have some other stuff that's not online yet. I'd be happy to show it to you. Does 2 o'clock work for you? The question you're asking is, does 2 o'clock work for you? Which is the question they're going to answer. And then you move on to your next statement. Where are you coming from, or whatever that is. But it's the psychology in the sentence structure. I have a few additional new listings, pique their interest, that aren't online yet. Disarm yourself from the question that you just asked. So 2 o'clock is the best time for you? Now that's the last line of the sentence, which is going to be the first thing that they're ready to answer. Now, if you say I have some other listings that aren't online yet, I'd be happy to show them to you. Pause. They're going to say, can you show me the listings? Which is why the psychology of the sentence structure ends with something along the lines of, is 2 o'clock definitely the best time for you? Or is this the best number to reach you at? Because you're evoking a yes answer. Okay? Which when they answer that question in the affirmative, right? We want them answering yes answers. You can then move on to the next thing. Make sense? Again, you have to do it the way I'm telling you to do it. There's a lot of kind of underlying psychology in the phrasing. If you say it the way I say it, and you do it in the order I tell you to do it, you will run into less issues. Okay? So is anybody else concerned with getting them on the phone and booking that in-office consultation? You have a question?
What if, like you said, that they live in Woodside and the apartment's like close to them and they absolutely not want to come to the office?
Okay, so first things first, I'm not going to assume they don't. I'm still going to sell. And that's kind of the point maybe I didn't drive home enough
Yeah.
when I said I'm still going to sell. If they're in flushing the apartments in Woodside, I'm not going to push the office, okay? I'm going to say, well, I meet all first-time clients in the office first. Are you passing through Midtown by any chance this week?
Yeah.
Now, if they're not, you're right there, Michelle?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Let me spice it up a little bit. If
That's not
if
the
they're
habit of mine.
if they do say no, I'm not, something like that, then I say, well, look, maybe it won't work out if you're passing through sometime. If you really can't be here, I could probably do like a Zoom consultation. It'll take 3 or 4 minutes, but the thing is, I just don't meet with strangers for the first time. Would you be interested in that? And that's when you end up in the Zoom, okay? But understand that this phone call is not the consultation. So this phone call, you don't go into qualifying, you don't go into the criteria, which is a big mistake that all of you guys make, is you go too deep in that initial phone call, and that initial phone call is just to book the appointment. And then in the consultation, you got nothing to talk about because you've glossed over all the important stuff, and what we're gonna talk about next is how important that stuff is and why you should never gloss over it, okay? So if you do my way and that person is really pushing you back on that meeting, what you're going to do is then you're going to push for the Zoom call, okay? Key, Zoom call. All right, I mean, all first-time clients in person. However, I could make an exception if you're open doing a Zoom or a FaceTime. It's just that I don't meet strangers for the first appointment. Now, if you look in our shared Google Drive, there's a handbook, and there's 2 pages of objections that someone could potentially give you to that office meeting. Followed each objection is a counter to that objection. So if somebody's saying, well, it's too far, or it's too much time, or no other agents have done this with me, it's like 18 or 20 responses to people objections, which, by the way, are generally pretty easy. No other agent has done this with me. Oh, well, how many apartments of those have you rented? Okay, which they're probably going to say no 90% of the time. Worst case scenario, they say, well, actually, I did see something I like and I applied on it. And you say, okay, cool. What happened? Oh, it was rented. Okay, cool. See, that's why I want to sit down and go over everything first, so we're seeing things in real time, so that doesn't happen again. Right? You guys hear me in every one of these meetings talk about how shitty real estate agents are, how they don't last in this business, and how this is an easy business to be great at. You've just got to pay attention to the few things and do the couple of little things that the other agents don't do to make yourself great, which, by the way, are the things I tell you to do. Okay? Now, do you guys feel confident in pitching the office meeting and as a secondary doing the Zoom? Any questions about this? All right. So we're going to fast forward a very short amount of time from that booking phone call to the consultation. And remember, I told you guys there's two variables, okay? You have the phone call, the consultation, and the showing. The 2 variables are the time between those 3 items, okay? Your goal is to make that phone call to the consultation as short amount of time as possible. If they can meet you in a half hour, you will meet them in a half hour. If you can't meet them in a half hour, send them to the fucking office anyways, tell them to come see me, and I'll give them to somebody else and negotiate your referral fee very high. But if it's 1 o'clock and that person can be here at 1:30, but you can't do it until 6, if you don't book them at 1:30 and book them at 6, I would say there's a 60% chance they'll never show up. That's how important this time is, okay? I have made more money booking the appointment to have somebody show up and just getting that referral fee, 25 or 30 or 40%, depending on the quality of the client, than most people have made in their career in real estate. Because I understand that minimizing this, if somebody can be here in 20 minutes, they're fucking showing up. If I book somebody for 6 o'clock, well, who knows what could happen over the next 4 hours? Make sense? And if I book it for this weekend, fuck me, not happening. They may tell you, like I'm gonna send you my DNA sample, and that way you be sure I'll be here Saturday. But who knows what could happen between now and Saturday? Exactly. It does not matter. You can't trust people. And by the way, it's not because they believe they're lying to you. They could be fully genuine. I'll make it there Saturday. But you don't know what could happen. You could be hit by a bus. It happens. You guys heard the story where I almost got hit by a bus. Right? And I pay attention, unlike most people. So let's talk about the consultation. You have another question?
No,
And guys, I want to ask all the fucking questions. This is a Q&A as much as it is like an informational talk. I want to give you guys all the information, but I want there to be no question that you guys don't know what to do, or there's any variables or any absence of trust that every word that I'm telling you is the way to do this, because I have closed thousands of transactions doing it this way. And I've watched agents, since I've kind of stepped back and I'm no longer being the touch point like I was with Kazi on every single client, I watch agents try to do things the wrong way, book and meet at the apartment, and their closing rate is like a 30th of what mine was. You got it? All right, good. So, the consultation. This is the first meeting with your client. Ideally, they're not jackhammering outside like they are today, but you never know. So, person shows up at the office. What do you need to have prepared for them when they get here? And remember, we don't want any downtime, any time that they sit here with nothing to do. Now, we'll talk about the virtual consultation second, but I don't want you guys thinking that you're going to be doing a lot of these, because I need you guys to be ass kickers or kick ass. I don't know. If you're kick ass at something, are you an ass kicker?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I want you to be ass kickers when it comes to booking the in-office meeting. Okay? As a distant second is going to be that Zoom call, but you are all going to try to be an ass kicker. You validated it. I don't know. At getting them to come to the office. So when somebody shows up to the office, what are you going to have prepared for them? You're going to have, coincidentally, the same paperwork that is at your fingertips right now, which is going to be the registration form, the agency disclosure form, and the anti-discrimination form. Now, I'm not going to tell you right now how to explain to them what these are, okay, in depth. You're going to have these stapled together and on a clipboard up front for them. When someone shows up, I don't care if you've just come back from 5 weeks in Tibet or whatever that movie is, okay, and you've got all the free time and clear-minded space in the world, they're going to show up and you're going to say, oh, let me just do X, Y, and Z. And that could be finish sending an email, get the conference room ready, whatever it is, okay? Let me just get the conference room ready. I'll be back in just 2 minutes. You're going to then say, this is our registration form. Pay attention, guys. It's what I use to keep track of what you're looking for. Because it is. Could you just do me a favor and get started on this, and I'll be back in just 2 minutes? Okay? Now, what are they going to do? They're going to start filling it out. And then you can come in here, close the door, do the fucking mock away now. I don't care. Okay? 2 minutes goes by, and you peek out, okay? And you just observe them to see how much progress they've made. Some people will be complete, right? Some people will be on their phone looking information up. Some people will be like with the clipboard back on the table, leg crossed, going through Instagram or something. If they're like, it looks like they're diligently writing, they're like looking stuff up on their phone, just kind of peek out and be like, makes sense? If they're done, then obviously you walk out, you finish the Macarena and go help them out. But you guys need to understand that this is dynamic, all right? You're not going to do the same thing for everyone. You're going to look at them and gauge where they are, okay? Even if you just literally went in my office or went around the corner or did nothing, and you come back, and they're still working on it, you might go, all right, just checking, I'll be right there. All right, they're done, you're like, oh, you're done, all right, let's get moving. Again, you don't want too much time if they finished it, but if they are literally pouring every informational tidbit about themselves onto this paper, you want it. So let them finish. When they're finished, you will meet them either in this conference room or the other meeting room or the other meeting table or at a desk, wherever. Ideally away from other agents, because you just don't know what the other agents are going to say. We literally talked about this morning. We talked about broker fees or this or that, or somebody's eating their French fries or something like that. You don't want any of that distraction. You want them locked in with you, okay? You want them paying attention to every word that you're saying, because now you are in control of the sales process, and you're going to find out everything you can about what they're looking for, because your goal is to find them the best fucking possible apartment for their criteria. Okay? Now you can only do that if you have a full vision of what they're looking for, right? And then all the resources at your disposal with no distractions. This meeting is that important, okay? Now, somebody's filled out the registration form. I find that there's only 2 ways that people fill this out, okay? Varying degrees on the first. But one, they give you very little information, okay? Sometimes people will just write their name down, sign the bottom, boom. Now, I know this is somebody that's going to require a lot more work to break into their brain versus the person that literally is like going through their phone, finding their landlord's address and phone number, which of course they don't have on hand, That person I know is willing to share all this information with me because they need and want my help, which then means they will be more susceptible to listening and comprehending what I have then to tell them. Okay, so I already know what I'm going into, which is literally half the battle, right? You're gonna preempt the questions, you're gonna preempt objections. The more you know about somebody, the better you can help them. Cool. So when you sit down with them, this is where I want you guys to pay very close attention to the registration form. All of this information is very beneficial for you. There are some redundancies on here, like budget is on there twice, number of bedrooms is on there twice. That's because that information is very important. Now, most people will have at the very least put their name and phone number on here, and they'll fill out some basic stuff like number of bedrooms, move date, and price range. That's really all you need, okay? Now, if somebody has given you more information, like their date of birth, their current rent, their landlord's information, that's gonna give you more indicating factors. So for example, somebody who's got a $2,400 one-bedroom apartment in Hell's Kitchen who's looking this year to upgrade, and their budget now is $3,000, and you find, okay, cool. So you're paying $2,400 right now. You want to spend $3,000. What neighborhood are you looking to be in? Oh, you want to stay in Hell's Kitchen? Okay. Now you mentioned upgrade. Tell me about your current apartment. These all seem like pretty viable questions, right? If you want to upgrade, I want to know where you live now. So say they live in a 500 square foot, one-bedroom apartment at $2,400 in Hell's Kitchen. What are we finding them for $3,000? Nothing. There's no even $3,000 listings right now. So is this something that you can really help? We don't know yet, because maybe we need to look in a cheaper neighborhood, right? Maybe we need to look in a different borough. Maybe we need to find them a studio somewhere uptown with a doorman, or in the Bronx or Brooklyn, somewhere with a doorman. Maybe they don't mind the commute. Maybe they work from home. Maybe they're open to living by the beach in Coney Island. You don't know these things yet, okay? But understand that these are the factors that you're about to find out. If you just go and you try to start directing somebody towards apartments and you haven't started asking these questions, do we all agree that this person with a $3,000 budget looking to upgrade and stay in Hell's Kitchen when they're paying $2,400 now in Hell's Kitchen is probably gonna be a tough client?
So, yeah.
Okay, do we all agree that if you ask the right questions, the variables that I just presented are very realistic and possible variables? Maybe they would do a studio, maybe they would do somewhere cheaper, maybe they want a nice, if they have a $2,400 apartment in Hell's Kitchen, it's probably a pretty decrepit old building, right? Because that's a very low price point for Hell's Kitchen. So do you guys now understand the importance of asking additional questions? Now, what most of you guys have done is you've just agreed to go show this person the crappiest apartment that they inquired on that they're probably not going to rent, right? Because they inquired on something, let's call it like a $2,900 alcove studio or something on 59th Street, which we already know that's probably not a very good apartment based off the price point in the current market. So are they going to rent it? Probably not. It's probably not going to be a real upgrade from where they are now, and if they're having to pay $600 more a year, and potentially a broker's fee, is that something somebody would want to do, to just kind of move laterally and spend more money?
Not necessarily.
No, probably they don't want to move to a similar apartment and spend more money. That's not their goal. So I like to work my way down on this list and fill in the gaps. Now, some of this stuff only works when they fill it out, okay? It's very unlikely I'm gonna sit with somebody and ask them their date of birth, because the relevance in this conversation of their date of birth is basically zero. So I like having it on here because it will allow you to follow up with them every year with some happy birthday, right? Same thing with them putting their social media account on here, right? But I wouldn't ask somebody, oh, what's your Instagram name? Like in person, that's a little like intrusive and just not like a relevant factor in this conversation. If they put it on there, great, you'll use it, okay? I like to start on the top. What is the uppermost left box on this form? Thank you, guys, price range. Now, it doesn't say budget, it says price range. Almost all clients will lie to you about their budget. Almost always. Now, in New York, most people end up spending 10% over their initial budget. You need to understand that. There's a whole group of real estate agents generally a little bit on the older side, who've been in this business for 10 or 15 years, and they take their clients out and just start showing their places over budget. Okay? Now, ultimately, most people will spend over budget, but the people that won't, or the people that will look in a cheaper neighborhood, you don't just want to take them out and start showing them overpriced apartments. That doesn't make sense. Okay? So I wouldn't advise on that tactic. But there's like a whole group of agents that just do it because they know people will spend more money. Now, I say price range because psychologically, when I ask somebody for a range, even though that lower number is a total bullshit number, okay? When they put that range in, they will typically give me the upper cap of that range, which I also know still is a bit fluid, okay? The reason the bottom number doesn't matter is because who wouldn't want to spend less money? Like somebody's like, oh, my budget's anywhere from like 4,000 down to 2,000. It's like, okay, well, what if we look down to 1,500? Why not? All right, it's kind of supposed to be a joke. Maybe it's a thing. Number of bedrooms, which again, understand may be flexible. If there's roommates, I like to make notes, the per person budgets. Okay, which by the way, isn't always equal across all of the roommates. Right? They might be looking for a $4,500 3-bedroom where they're average each spending $1,500, but if there's a, let's say 6,000 with 3 people, so each of their budget is $2,000. Maybe it's a 3-bedroom apartment where one of the units has the bathroom in the bedroom. Maybe that person would spend an extra $400 for that, and the other 2 would spend $200 less. Right? It's not always constant that they're each going to spend $2,000. And you will notice this when you start doing applications, like one of these might be much better off than the other, where their guarantors or parents are spending more money, or it's their personal income, and one of them makes a whole lot more money than the rest. And then agent, right? You want to make sure that you put your name on there. If you're working with a senior agent, then you want to put the senior agent's name on there. And if you add another agent to help you out, you want to make notes on that. Okay, this is just because down the line, when you're working with 15 different people and you want to go back, you're going to need to remember this stuff. And then earliest and latest move dates. You guys are going to get a whole bunch of people right now that want October 1st. You might even get some that want November 1st. Does that mean you can't help them? No, it just means you need to ask more questions. Some of them might be ready to move now, some of them may not. It really, really depends. Okay, but you need to know when they can move, which means you're going to, if it is November 1st, then you wouldn't just assume it's November 1st. You would ask questions. Oh, are you in a lease until the end of October? When's your lease up? October 31st? Okay, so you probably need something, not November 1st, because where are you going to sleep Halloween night, right? Most people move 2 weeks or so in advance. Would that be something that you could swing? Well, I'm worried about the paying double rent. Okay, well, if I find you a good deal, does that make sense? Which, by the way, we're not even talking numbers. If you find them something they like, 90% of the time, they'll convince themselves to spend the 2 weeks in rent. All right, moving down. Now you've got to go through this checklist. You want to make sure you have their name, their phone number, and email. That's important. Remember, these guys have agreed to meet with you for a 3 or 4 minute meeting before you go out and look at apartments. We're trying to go through this quick, but you're doing a very high level fact finding. Okay? I want you guys to understand high level fact finding where you're looking for potential red flags. All right? When you find these red flags, then you dig a little bit deeper. And the best way to dig a little bit deeper is to ask off-the-cuff questions. Okay? And that's that tonality that we talked about a little while ago. And you'll see it start to come up here. So, most people are not going to put their current address, or they're not going to give you all of the information here. Now, if you get an address and you recognize the landlord, you might say, oh, is that Salil? Oh, is that City Suburban? Oh, interesting, that sounds familiar. Who's your landlord? Again, you live on 6th Avenue? Who is your landlord? Versus, oh, that address sounds so familiar. Who's your landlord? Is way different. Okay? The first one feels like you're prying and putting them on the spot. That address sounds really familiar. I wonder if I've been in the building. Who's your landlord? Is totally different. Okay? But again, you need to understand what your client's real needs are. So understanding where they're coming from. And not everybody may be comfortable. Some people will put you right back in line. And those people, it's okay to say, okay, I don't need to cry, I'm sorry. The thing is, I want, in my mind's eye, a perfect vision of kind of where you are now and what you're looking for. Okay? Now, we'll talk about understanding that what somebody is looking for in a little bit probably doesn't exist. Okay, everybody has this picture perfect idea, but in one of planet Earth's most expensive cities, people generally end up spending more money or not getting exactly what they want. That's just how this works, okay? So notice also here it says current address, landlord's information. Would you be interested in us helping you rent out your apartment? If somebody's breaking their lease or something, they might circle this. Now, even if they just give us their address, those of you, we talked about getting listings last week. This wasn't even in that meeting. I'm gonna give you one more tip. If you're talking about getting listings, you have somebody who's telling you that they're moving, which means the apartment that they live in is about to be vacant. So potentially, you could reach out to their landlord and say, hey, I'm working with Chuck. He mentioned that he's moving out in 30 days. You want to run this by the client at this point first. I'm just curious, could I help you market that apartment? Fair enough? Obvious, easy tactic that everybody overlooks, yes. And then ask for their information about their landlord, which, by the way, if they don't provide, you can still look it up on Property Show. Moving down, employer. Some people will list the actual company that they work at and give you all that information. A lot of people will just skip this box entirely. I'd like to then ask, because what is the utility list? Do you really need to know where they work? No. What's the utility of this box? Any idea? Not yet. We're not there yet. No guesses? Where do they commute to on a daily basis? Which, of course, probably will affect where you choose to live. What train lines you live off of, right? Do they work remote? So I might just ask, okay, you didn't mention anything about the employer. I'm just curious, where do you commute to every day? Or if they left it blank, there's a really high chance that they're a student, which then you would cross off employer and write their school name, and then you need to understand where their school is, which, by the way, you probably don't want to ask when they tell you their school, where is that located? Because if you're supposed to be the knowledgeable, professional, expert New York City real estate agent, you should probably know where Fordham is, where Columbia is, where NYU is, where Pace is, okay? Which, by the way, is a question because some of those have campuses in multiple areas in the city. So if it is one of those schools, then you ask, which campus? Okay? Remember, this is a really fucking easy job. City knowledge is something you have or you don't have. If you don't have it, you've got to do some of this work. You've got to ask these questions, so you need to know this information about the city. I don't think it's very difficult. Obviously, the more time you spend here, you should acquire this. But I talk to all of you guys day after day, week after week, and you guys tell me, like, I didn't know that. Like, where are you from? You're like, I grew up in New York City. So obviously, these are things that just being here over time, you may not accumulate this knowledge. So as real estate agents, you should know the main schools, the main hospitals, right? So across the form, the right side of this form from employer is, and Rashini, you were on it, we were talking about employer, this is the part where you find out how much money they make or their income. And really this has to do with qualifications. Now, we don't get too much into qualifications in the phone call for booking the apartment, because it really doesn't matter that much and it gives you less to talk about in this conversation, okay? However, if it's a low-priced apartment that they contact you for, you're probably then going to want to ask them some qualifying questions, because if it's a $2,500 apartment or a $3,000 apartment or even a $3,500 apartment, when you meet with them, if they don't qualify for that, you probably have nothing else to show them. However, if it's a decent budget apartment, you hold that off until this call, until this conversation. Now, do you make 40 times a monthly rent? Yes, I do, or no, I don't. Okay, sometimes they'll say, well, actually, no, but I'm a student and my parents will co-sign. Or sometimes they just say yes, but your spidey sense is tingling, so then you use off the cuff. Oh, what do you do? Oh, interesting. Yeah, what do you do? And then they tell you, well, I'm an IT designer, or I do this or that, and this is where you need to find out, is this a W-2 salary job? Do they get a weekly paycheck or a bi-weekly paycheck? Or is it a 1099? Or do they own a business or something? Now, this is New York City. You're going to get a lot of 1099 business owner type people that you work with. Why might that be relevant in this conversation? Anyone?
Because they may not make that money, you go get a business owner.
So if somebody makes $100,000 a year and they're a salary job W-2, they qualify 40 times $2,500. Okay, so they qualify for a $2,500 apartment. Now I know I'm using these numbers because it's easy math. Okay, 40 times 2,500 is 100,000. They qualify. Realistically, that's a very low budget, so you might have to do a little more difficult math. But multiplication division is very simple. Okay, plus you all have calculators. So if somebody is 1099, a business owner or an independent contractor, and they make $100,000, they're not going to qualify for a $100,000 apartment because on their 1040, on their tax returns, they will have a lot written off. They're going to write off their transportation. They're going to write off their advertising expense. They're going to write off their cell phone bill. They're going to write off their home office. Things you can't write off when you're W-2. So that $100,000 1099, realistically, that person probably pockets $100,000, but then everything he spends money on, he writes off. Okay? So at the end of the year, his 1040 might just show $24,000. How much does he qualify for?
Not much.
You know, like less than $1,000 a month. Okay? He does not qualify at all, which means then he either has to have a guarantor or hire a guarantor company. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to just ask, kind of directly down from here, is how's your credit? Now, I've heard in the past that it is illegal to ask somebody their credit score. I've not seen that spelled out on any state legislation, but I'll just tell you, don't ask somebody what their credit score is. I would just say, oh, by the way, and how's your credit? Now, if somebody tells you it's great, perfect. If somebody says it should be good, that's a red flag that you need to ask a follow-up question. If somebody says it's bad, then you would say, okay, I'm just curious, what's affecting your credit that's making it bad? Makes sense? If somebody says it should be good now, okay, then they probably don't understand credit because your credit score is a reflector of your credit history. So now doesn't mean anything, okay? What really matters is the score. So say, oh, you mentioned now, I'm just curious what changed recently. Right? Again, you're asking high-level questions to identify potential red flags, and then you go a little bit deeper when you need to. And that's how this 4-minute conversation turns into a 15-minute conversation, which, by the way, if you're doing this correctly, is going to present you as the most professional agent because you're the one asking the actual questions, right? Which you're ideally doing this professionally enough that you're building a relationship with this person and helping them understand what a broker is being paid for. Otherwise, it's just kind of shooting in the dark when they're looking for apartments because the agents don't know any of this. And if it is somebody who's 1099, right, it's probably a good thing that you're asking these questions now because it's going to affect what happens next with them, which is why a lot of people applying apartments don't get approved and wonder what happened. And I'd say 70 to 80% of the time, the agents don't know what happened, which is why we're having this conversation and you all are responsible, soon to be very knowledgeable agents. And I thank you for that. So, ask them about credit. Next up, and this is important, we're kind of working our way down the list here. Employer, 40 times credit. Back over here, a little more of a less intrusive question. Oh, do you have any pets? Now, a service animal is not a pet. However, most people don't know that. So when somebody says yes or no, and they ask you, do you have a service animal? Or you ask them if they have a pet, you then ask them, is it a service animal? Now, if it is a service animal, it does not matter if it's some Kodiak bear, 1,200-pound service animal. If it's a service animal, the landlord cannot reject them.
Oh, very nice.
Okay? If it's a 2-headed fucking Rottweiler, the landlord still must accept them. You understand? Now, if it's not a service animal and it's a 49-pound beagle, the landlord can choose to reject them, potentially based off of their pet policy. Because pets are not a protected class. Make sense?
But the dog and sign up.
But a dog can be signed up, and the legality of getting your animal licensed as a service animal and all that bullshit. Okay, it's relatively easy, and we're not going to get into that today. But you just need to understand the difference between service animal and pet, and then if it's a service animal, it's a protected class, and the landlord can't charge them a pet fee because a service animal is not a pet. Make sense? Then you go down to occupants. How many people will be living there? Now, this is where it gets interesting because some people, again, you want people to open up to you. And if they are secretive about some of this information, then they have not fully opened up to you. They might say things like, my roommate, whereas you want to know, is it a friend or a girlfriend? Or they might say the other occupant, yeah, there's going to be 2 occupants, but you can't just say, is it your girlfriend, wife, because you're not supposed to ask those questions, okay? However, just understand when they use this kind of the language that is non-specific, it likely means that they don't see you as a friend. They still see you as the person sitting across the desk asking them interview-style questions. Okay? I'm not saying then you say, is this your girlfriend, boyfriend, friend, lover, et cetera, just understand that when they use this language, then you're not there with them yet. Make sense? And you're also going to ask, if needed, would you be able to get a guarantor? Which some landlords, by the way, even if somebody is making $800,000 a year for a $5,000 apartment, some landlords still want a guarantor. So you should ask these questions. You will note also it says, what state do they live in? Because some landlords don't want Texas, Florida, or Louisiana. Odd trio of states, right? Those states have this Homestead Act, which I think effectively means that if somebody gets sued, you can't take their home. Unrealistically, that the landlord would be suing them for enough to take their home, but whatever, landlords can have whatever policies they want as long as it falls within whatever legal right. So if they want to, states are not a protected class. Okay, the state you live in, not a protected class. So landlords can choose to do this. But it's important that you ask these questions. Now, you also want to establish that the guarantors earn what factor of the rent? 80 times the monthly rent. So if it's 3 roommates and 3 guarantors, it's 80 in total. So you're combining different guarantors. Right? So the $6,000 apartment, each guarantor does not need to make, what's 8 times? A lot of money, okay? That one guarantor, all the guarantors individually have to add up to 80 times the total rent. Okay? You have a question?
Yes, what about international guarantors?
Very good question. So let me just finish talking about domestic guarantors. 80 times. Some landlords also, like city and suburban, want 100 times the monthly rent. And you have to ask the same questions about the source of income. Business owner, independent contractor, salary, and how their credit is. Okay? And it's a good idea when we start talking about paperwork that you talk about, if they have a guarantor, going over this process with the guarantor as well. Okay. Now, if they're international or they have an international guarantor, understand that there are not many landlords that will take an international guarantor. Okay, there's one right now that has good prices. That's Metro Nest, mostly East Village. There's a couple of high-end luxury buildings that will. I think the Copper Building does international guarantors because they're close to the UN and they're used to a lot of international people. Don't quote me on that. But a lot of the higher end buildings, not a lot, a handful of the higher end buildings will do international guarantors. But generally speaking, no go on international guarantors. So that's a big red flag. And they are likely going to then need to hire a corporate guarantor like Insurance or the guarantors. Prior to 2019, if somebody did not qualify, they didn't have great credit, or they had really bad credit, or they didn't have sufficient income, landlords could ask for them to prepay rent. Some landlords would ask them to pay the full year. A lot of international people just paid the full year. Or the landlord would ask them to prepay extra, or not prepay, but pay extra security deposit, an extra month, an extra 2 months of security deposit that they would have on file in case the person destroyed the apartment or didn't pay rent, they had to go through the eviction process. Which the eviction process generally is going to take like 8-9 months or longer. Okay, so that's why landlords wanted this extra security. The 2019 law, the HSTPA Act, made that illegal, so landlords can't do this. They can't collect extra rent or extra security deposit. And not that they didn't exist, but then because of this, there's a big rise in third-party guarantors like the guarantors or Insurance. And now somebody would hire that group or pay those companies roughly a month, give or take, based on their qualifications, to insure the lease for them and be their guarantor. Which means that those services, once the landlord evicts the person, will pay the landlord back those months that they lost. Make sense? Any questions about that? Okay. Now we go back down to what somebody's looking for in the apartment. So if you look at the form, it says how many bedrooms, Okay? Now, we asked at the top, remember I told you there were some redundancies on here. We're asking again because now you know a little bit more about the client, so you might be revising that, right? Oh, would you consider a flex apartment? Oh, would you do a studio instead of a one bed? Remember, you're trying to get to know this person to understand what they're looking for, right? So now you've asked them where they are, where they're commuting to, so some of this stuff now may change. If I found you something that was a little over budget, but it was a no-fee apartment, would something like that work for you, right? This is why you're kind of re-engaging in these topics. It also says, are you the decision maker, and would you consider yourself a decisive person? Now, this is information that you can use down the line when you're selling them. If they're not the decision maker, then probably right now you want to find out who is, right? And if they're not a decisive person, you say, oh, you said you're not a decisive person. I'm just curious, why do you feel that way? Right? Because remember, you're going to at some point ask them for the sale, which, by the way, I know it might sound a little pushy, but if somebody doesn't make a decision today, the chances of them not getting that apartment are very high because it is a market that apartments go really, really fast. So if somebody's not ready to make a decision today, you letting them think about it is not helping them with the process. So you need them to be in a position where they can make a decision today, and if they're not able to do so, finding the factors out why they can't, and seeing if those factors are obstacles that you can overcome. If they're not, then maybe it's too much of a variable for you, and you don't show them today. Or maybe they're too early. Or maybe you say, you know what, I'm comfortable with this level of variable. They haven't seen any apartments yet, so instead of showing them 2 places, I'll show them 6. Does this make sense? Guys, I just want to remember, I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but most of you guys are meeting your clients at the apartment, and they walk away from you and you have no fucking idea why they didn't close. Which, by the way, you can follow up with, but you're not hearing back from them. Okay? Next, we have apartment must-haves and would likes. Obviously, you can see why these things are important, but also understand that they're not set in stone. Some of these must-haves may not actually be what they get. And the example that I gave is I had an agent who had two girls. They were roommates. They wanted a 2-bed. They were going to settle on a 1-bed. One person was going to live in the living room, put some bookshelves up, and the other person was going to live in the bedroom and maybe pay a little bit more in rent. And we brought them to a luxury building and showed them a studio, which they fell in love and promptly applied for. Okay? Now, if I talked to them about a studio at this point, would they have wanted to see it? No. Now, the second we went into that fucking lobby, all right, they would have lived in like the package room. Okay? You understand? Now, that's how things obviously wouldn't rent to the package room. And if this was a shitty option, I wouldn't have pushed it on them. Okay? Now, if somebody tells me what they want, I want them to get as close to that as possible. However, a 2-bedroom did not exist with what they were looking for. And after, hours of me looking for other apartments, we just showed them a handful of apartments, by the way. After hours of me looking for other apartments and the agent taking them across, getting lunch with them, and then being like, well, we didn't really like anything, then I'm like, I just got one more, take them here. Okay? And that ended up being the one that they fell in love with. Because it was probably the best option for them, right? Which I had in my back pocket. Okay, and the neighborhood preference. Now here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to flip over to your last page, and I want you to draw a big triangle. Any page, yeah, last page. Okay. Now, for those of you guys who are not good with you guys not good with distractions, this is a triangle. It's like a 3-sided square. That wasn't funny. All of this is obvious to me, so I don't know. I don't mean to be condescending. On the right, I want you to draw a money sign, and that's going to stand for price. That's their budget. On the left side, I want you to write neighborhood. Okay, that's a location, obviously. And on the bottom, I want you to write APT/BLDG/amenities. These are the 3 factors that really matter. price, location, and the apartment slash the building slash what the building has. Okay, maybe we could make like a hexagon or something, but really I'm grouping all of those into one because that's the apartment in my mind. Now, most people want this bullseye right in the middle. Most people logically will settle for something anywhere else. Most people usually end up here or here or here, spending way more money than they want, looking at a much cheaper neighborhood, right? Or compromising on the apartment, doing a studio instead of a one bed, or dropping the doorman. Most people end up leaving the confines of their criteria triangle. Now, do you want to be pushing them outside of that triangle? No. But you need to understand whether exactly what they're looking for and which of the three are the most movable. Okay? Now again, you're not trying to push somebody in an apartment that doesn't work for them. But generally speaking, I already told you, most people end up spending 10% more. Those are people who can afford to. But there's a lot of people who can't afford to, or can only afford to spend 3% more, but then they're not happy with what those results buy them, so they have to look in an even cheaper neighborhood to get more of an apartment. You guys follow me on this? So this is why you're asking all these questions, to understand where their mind is and what factors are variable for them, which is why this conversation is so super important.
Once you find out what they need, how do you convince that they will need?
Okay, that's a really good question. We talked about this in Module 4, closing frame. So, if somebody tells you what they want in the consultation, say they want a one bedroom, 650 square feet or greater, in a doorman building in Manhattan, south of 59th Street. If you say, great, I have something on 50th Street, there's no doorman, are you interested? Do they want to see it?
Say yes.
No, they don't. They just told you they want a doorman. Okay? Okay, now, so this is their criteria. Okay? What was the budget I gave you?
16 something.
Okay, so let me picture again. Their budget's $4,000. They want a 650 square foot or more, one bedroom with a doorman below 59th Street. So you tell them, I have a 400 square foot apartment in a doorman building on 50th Street. Are you interested in seeing it? The answer is no, it's too small. Okay? What if you tell them, I have something in 96th Street? Do they want to see it?
No.
No. Are you stupid? Why would you try to show it to them? Right? Because right now, I'm not saying you're stupid, and I don't need to jump at you, but I want you guys to understand the insane fact that somebody tells you, I want a bologna sandwich, and you say, how are anchovies? Okay? It doesn't make any sense. They just told you what they wanted. You can't suggest something else. It makes you sound stupid if you do. Okay? Now, how do we get them to spend extra money or look in the other neighborhood? This is where your ability to persuade them comes in hand. So ideally, there's one apartment. So now we're talking about looking at apartments, okay? And I think it's fair enough that we flip over the page, okay? Because this is actually kind of sequentially the next thing we're going to talk about. What do you see on this page, on the registration form? Information about broker fees, okay? And then you've got a long list here. Here's where you're going to list the apartments that you're going to show them, okay? Now, if you're showing them OP apartments, meaning the owner is paying the fee, then I would probably put that in the notes section here, that it's a no-fee apartment to them. But here's where you're choosing the apartments. Now, how do you get them outside of this criteria triangle? Well, generally there's one they contact you that they want to see. So we're going to make sure that they see that one. Okay? Now, it may have become apparent during your consultation that that apartment doesn't work for them. Now, if it's the only thing you have and there's nothing else that exists, you're just going to say, well, good thing we had this meeting. I think we saved each other a lot of time. That apartment doesn't work. I'll keep an eye out, keep looking. Sorry you had to come down, but again, we didn't spend an hour and a half looking at the apartment that doesn't work. Aren't you glad you came in? In fact, they would be, right? Now, if that apartment does exist and is worth seeing, you're going to list that apartment here as number one. It may not also be number one. There might be something that you want to show them beforehand as a setup. Okay? Now, setup apartments aren't to waste somebody's time, but it is generally to help them add perspective to what they're going to see. Now, they may have contacted you for one apartment. You may know that is the best apartment for them. However, if this person has seen 0 apartments, and you take them to see this one apartment, they're not going to rent it. Because they have nothing to compare it to. Which is why you would want to add a setup apartment or 2. This is where understanding the psychology of how somebody makes a decision is really important. And we're not talking about like Freudian psychology or anything that like is at all complicated, just understanding that nobody goes to the first thing they see. Okay? So generally you're going to be able to get them out to see something. Now, what I like to do, if I'm doing a consultation, let's say Kazi's the agent, he brings them to me, I'm the senior agent, I do the interview because Kazi's new, which by the way, if you guys book some of your appointments for the office and you schedule them with me, I'll do a couple consultations for you so you can see how I do them, how I ask all the questions that we just talked about, the tonology, the cadence, the making them feel comfortable, the making them not see me as a salesperson, which I mean, technically I am, but at the end of the day, most people are like really close because they're afraid you're gonna like sell some shit on them they don't want, convince them to spend more money. You, again, and I repeat, this is important that at a core philosophy you understand this, your goal is their goal. In fact, you are their agent. And what does an agent do? Operates on behalf of the person who's hired them. So if your goal is to sell them some shit they don't want, just so you can make a commission, shame on you. Okay? Your goal is to find them the best place, and their goal is to find the best place, even if it does not fit exactly within their criteria. I'll wait for the siren to go by and collect my thoughts here. So let's say Kazi is the junior agent. I'm going to say, give me just a minute. I'm going to start looking for some apartments. Now, if you got, and I'm giving you a heads up what to do in this scenario if I'm doing this for you, okay? But if it's just you one-on-one with a client, remember, there's one apartment they contacted you for. It's probably a good idea that you had 1 or 2, like just in case apartments on this list already. But things change drastically in this consultation. So somebody's needs you may find have changed quite a bit. So these apartments may not work. In which case you say, well, I had a couple lined up, but after what you told me, it sounds like there might be some better options. So I'm going to kind of put these in the back burner. Can you just give me 2 minutes? Like, I don't know, you check your email or something. I just got to focus. And that's why being at the office gives you more resources because you can sit in front of a computer, you can come and ask me, you can ask some other agents for some options that might work for this person. Use the group chat. Okay? Now, it's a hell of a lot easier to do this when you're sat in the office and this person just goes down to their Instagram for 2 minutes, right? Then when you're out on the street, sending messages to the WhatsApp group, trying to do the listings inbox on your phone. Right? So that's one of the powerful things about being in the office. You have more resources. Resources is a power. Now, if I have a junior agent there, I'm going to have the junior agent make bullshit conversations. Junior agents typically don't know as much as I do when it comes to where this person's going to go. So if you were ever in this meeting with me, I don't want you to say shit about real estate. Okay? Because you might be saying, well, good thing you're looking at Manhattan because like anybody who's moving to New York City needs to live in Manhattan, rather than the outer boroughs, especially if you're first time in the city. When I might be thinking in my head, all right, I'm going to show them some shit in the Upper East Side and then convince them to move to Queens. Right? So if you're there as a junior agent making conversation, trying to like teach them about real estate, bad idea, because you don't know what I'm thinking, right? I just want you to be like, oh, how about the weather? It sure is cloudy. Do you like clouds? Okay, like that's what I want you saying. Okay, I don't want you talking about real estate at all. If you're obviously on your own, then just say, give me 2 minutes, and this is where you're really going to like dig down and focus, and then you're going to go through the listings email. You're going to go through. I'm working on building some databases for you guys. If you pay for a database, so you have to look on StreetEasy. You can do that too. You send a message to the WhatsApp group. All right, where you say, give me 2, I'm just going to go talk with my broker real quick and kind of run what you're looking for. He has a lot of off-market properties and different management companies, landlords he works with. Will you just give me 2 minutes? And then you come and see me or you come and see somebody else in the office. Make sense? That's what you're going to do with this time. Then you're going to go back and you're going to start writing some properties down on here, or you're doing that with them in front of you. I generally don't like to share this list with them yet. Because right now, they'll look at that place on 96th Street after they just told me they want to be on 59th Street or lower and say, why would I want to see that? Because right now it's logical. We talked about this in Module 4, closing. Right now it's logical. And I call this an emotion sandwich, okay? And what happens is, you take them out, you show them some options, and this is where you say, well, there was another place. And you're going to tell me it's a little higher than you thought that we want it to be, but look, I think, and remember, like, if I'm wasting your time, I'm wasting my time. But I really think, this place is like, I don't know, probably 8-9 minutes from here. If we go check it out, you may hate it, but it also might just help add some perspective to your search. You down to just go see this one? I know you got a little time, we just go see it right now. Is that cool with you? You say it like that, most people will say, yeah, I guess, like, we're out here now. I've cleared my schedule. Let's go see it. Again, you got to sell it a little bit, persuade them to go see it. But then they go to 96th Street and they're like, oh shit, like, this is within my budget. It's not exactly where I want to be, but it's an express. Actually, it's 10 blocks from express, but you know, you take a one-stop transfer to the express, you're all the way downtown in 11 minutes, right? Now it makes sense. So now they've seen the apartment, they fall in love with it emotionally, and now they will reverse engineer. They will have that conversation internally with themselves. Well, I guess it would really only take me like 14, 15 minutes to get downtown because the express stop. Right? Oh, I guess I could have my friends come to me because now I have a bigger apartment. But now they will reverse engineer the logic and explain to themselves. But if you let them see your list, or you show them something outside of their criteria triangle before they've seen it and had a reaction to it, they're not going to want to see it. Okay? That's why it's really, really important that you kind of understand the psychology and you make this list. Okay? I, in fact, when I take clients out, like to take this sheet, fold it in a way that I'm able to see my list here. Okay? And then fold it in half and pop it in my pocket, so that way I just like make it look like it's my notes, because I don't want them seeing everything that I know we're going to do. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, one note on the registration form. I said I wasn't going to get into depth on this conversation, but understand that if you're advertising something online, it must be a no-fee apartment. Okay? Now, somebody may want to see only no-fee apartments, which in that case, you're going to line up a bunch of no-fee apartments, and then you may put in your back pocket, at the bottom of your list, a fee apartment or two, which then when you're out, you might say, well, you know, I got another place, I'm not 100% sure it's going to work for you. You know, you mentioned not wanting to pay a fee. This one would have a fee, but like if you like it, I can go back to my broker, and if you're like ready to go, you want to apply, I'll really beat them up, and I can get you a good deal. You want to give it a shot? Something along those lines? And there's a good chance the person will say, well, you know, I haven't really seen any fee apartments. Why not? To which they then go to, they fall in love with the apartment, and then can reverse engineer the logic as to why they should pay a broker fee, because it's one time, but they're going to live here for the next 4 years. Make sense? Which is especially better, even if it's a cheaper apartment, because it's a much better deal that pays off year over year, month over month. Let's see. From the consultation, the goal, because remember, you were booking a time for them to see the apartment. From the consultation, then you go immediately out and see apartments. You meet here, go over this, and then you go see the apartments. No downtime in between, because remember, there was 3 points of contact: the call, the consultation, and the showing. And the goal was to reduce those 2 variables of time in between all 3. Okay? So you can book somebody for a half hour from now, great, you book them and then show them apartments. This is the downfall with the Zoom or virtual consultation or the FaceTime, is that now there's more time between the consultation where you're building rapport with them, you're making them like you, right? You're getting to know them, understanding their needs, and then you're going out 2 days from now. If you are doing the Zoom consultation, ideally it's in the case where they're remote, because you couldn't get them in at all, and then you're doing a Zoom call or a FaceTime call with them from each apartment. Which, by the way, if you're virtually showing apartments, you don't go to the apartments, take pictures and video and send it to them. If you're the one that's going to run around for this person and take videos, you're going to make sure that they're making an exception for you and setting aside 2 or 3 minutes for you to FaceTime them inside the apartments. Okay? That if you're going to work for somebody remotely, that's how you're going to do it, because your time is valuable. If you're going out of your way to do this, you're going to make sure that they're setting some time aside for you to be doing so, especially if they can't be here, if they're in another country or whatever the case may be. Okay? And remember also that we only work for our clients, and somebody becomes your client at what point in the interaction? First substantive meeting, which is going to be of the 3, booking the call, the consultation, or the showing. The consultation, that's when somebody becomes your client. Okay? All right, I want to kind of open up to a Q&A and see what questions you have on this, maybe some gaps, where I skipped over something where you had a question, or even some issues that you've run into trying to book calls before.
I just need to know the next state. I have Texas, Florida, and
In Louisiana. And specifically, DLDG is a landlord that doesn't want those, that won't approve guarantors from those states. But there's a couple, I mean, they're just very tough across the board, but there's probably a couple of them.
The question has nothing to do with that, it's just, I said the Homestead Act. So does that mean, like, if someone goes in bankruptcy, they can't get their house taken in the Homestead Act too?
I'm not 100% sure of that. I'm sure, like, again, if not, it's such an obscure chance that this is going to happen, and
Yeah.
it's like, I have not spent any time thinking about this. I just know that. And here's the thing, if somebody does have a relative or guarantor who's in one of those states and makes a lot of money, chances are 50% of the time they have somebody else who would also be the guarantor. Not always, but if that person makes $700,000 in Louisiana, they probably know somebody else who could be a guarantor, and because they have that kind of money, there's a good chance that other person will be like, well, I know you're super wealthy, like, I'll do you this favor. Remember, it's your job to make those things happen too, because as a real estate agent, you may have to piece together different things when you're faced with a potential brick wall as to why the deal may not go through. Any other questions? Okay. One last thing that I just thought about. Remember, your state linked together these three forms: registration form, agency disclosure, and discrimination. Now, we talk about this in Module 4 at closing. I'll mention it again now just because it's relevant. The additional two forms you are going to have are going to be the registration form and the application. I'm sorry, not. You all nodded when I said this, and it's not the right form. The required documents form, not registration, required documents form, and the application. Now, I like to review the required documents form at the end of the consultation. And what I do is, after doing a consultation, I just say, hey, if you see something you like, you got to make sure you're ready to apply immediately. When it comes time to apply, most landlords are going to have you fill out an application, whether it's a paper application, because this is New York City, a lot of old school landlords, or an online application, which if that's the case, you come back here, I'm happy to walk you through it. That way we just get it done on the spot. Make sense? Remember, you're getting that information so you know when you prompt them in the future, they already agreed that it does make sense when you bring them back to the office. And then you're going to have to supply this paperwork. Most landlords want to see your tax returns, employment letter, pay stubs, bank statements, and ID. Some landlords are a little more strict than that, but again, this is New York City, so you need to be prepared for at least that. Fair enough? Mm-hmm. And again, you're watching them, like I'm watching you guys. I don't know if you guys pay attention, like literally, my eyes dart around this room to make sure you guys are fucking paying attention to me the entire meeting. That's because I need to make sure you're being receptive, not your own, but being receptive. You need to be doing the same thing with your client. And when you say, so this is the paperwork you're going to need, makes sense, you're going to watch them and make sure they give you an affirmative yes. If they don't, you're going to say, oh, what did you expect? Or did you expect something less? But you've got to be paying attention to them. Okay. Also, there's usually an application fee. Sometimes it's $20 if it's a condo or co-op. It could be more. There's some co-ops that want like $1,500. If you have a co-op, you'd say one of the ones on the list today is a co-op if you're okay with it. Or don't worry, I don't have any co-ops for you today. I just want to let you know. And then some landlords do have a good faith deposit, which is just a holding deposit. It's usually $500 up to 1 month, and it's refundable if your application is not approved. Any questions on this? And you're going to say that to me, just like that. Do you guys have any questions, by the way? All right. And then also, when I give them this form, so these are for you, by the way. These forms are for you. Sometimes your clients will want to take them, right? And you go running after them and tell them, no, they're your forms. If they want a copy of this, tell them that if you want to take a copy of this, you can take a picture of your cell phone. If you're in the office, you could always run it through the copier. But I generally never give copies of this stuff to my clients, but I do give them this. I tell them, these are for my records, but I'll give you guys this information, this paperwork, just so you have it when it comes time to apply. This is what you need, this paperwork. And here's just our standard application. I'll just give it to you so you know what an application looks like. And I'm putting an application in their hands because psychologically I want this person to be moving closer to putting in an application. So me putting an application in your hands is you accepting that you're prepared to do an application. Make sense? The last 2 pages I gave you, which do not come into play in this meeting at all, are the payment breakdown and the brokerage fee agreement. Cool? We talk about that in a separate meeting. This has nothing to do with the consultation. We're not going to get into it today. Any questions on any of the stuff we just covered?
Did this two documents after the showing?
No, before the showing. At the end of the consultation, before the showing. Okay, it's important that you put that in your hand because you want their mind geared towards applying at that initial conversation. And then you go out and look at the apartments, which then, when we talk about closing, which then, when you're showing those apartments, you convince them to come back to the office to apply. Not everybody may want to come back to the office, but a nice thing about coming back to the office means that you can guide them through the process and get everything done now. Right? Confirm with the landlord, I have a complete application. You can confirm in an hour. Versus, if you send them on their way to go home, I find that the majority of the time, most people don't do it. Right? Because then things are slowed down, they get a little bit of cold feet, or they call somebody and say, hey, I saw this apartment I like, I'm not 100% sold on it because it probably didn't fall within their triangle of criteria, okay? And then they call their aunt or somebody and they're like, well, if you're not 100% sure, you should definitely apply. No, the aunt's gonna say, oh, you're not 100% sure, honey, maybe you keep looking. Because that's the safe advice to give, okay? But remember, the first 25 minutes of this conversation, we talked about getting them to that consultation in the office. And if you can't sell that, then you do the Zoom consultation. But we just talked for over an hour. I think you guys would agree, pretty much everything that we talked about should play a part in your conversation with clients. It wouldn't make sense not to, now that you know all this information. So if you're not doing this, then you're not doing this job very well. Okay, you're just blindfolded trying to hit a target. You have no idea what you're doing. You need to know as much information about somebody to be able to help them. And if somebody's not qualified or you don't have apartments, save yourself time and save them time by sending them on their way. You don't need to just show somebody an apartment if we already agree that it doesn't work for either one of you. If somebody then demands that you show them an apartment, be like, you already told me this doesn't work for you. Some people might be a little frustrated because they came down to the office, but you're like, the whole reason we had this conversation was you just told me this won't work for you. And remember again that their goal is your goal. You guys are aligned in this, right? When you're trying to book the appointment with them to meet in the office, their goal is probably to meet at the apartment. So you got to convince them why it makes sense to go over these things first. People have a very low regard for real estate agents because most of the time they suck. Well, if you're just meeting somebody at the street, on the street at the apartment, there's not much you can do to not suck. You don't truly understand what their criteria is. You don't understand how many apartments they've already seen. If somebody's seen 30 apartments, you don't need to show them 4 apartments. In fact, they've probably seen some pretty decent apartments. They passed up on some great apartments. Why? Because their mind isn't ready to make a decision, or they haven't had very good real estate agents that put things in perspective for them like you're trying to. No more questions?
Just to make sure I have things in order. These 3 sheets, your
Registration form, agency disclosure form.
New York State disclosure, and the New York State anti-discrimination. That's the first thing that they would add.
You're gonna staple those together and you're gonna have that on a clipboard here for them.
Right.
If it is a remote consultation, you're gonna fill it out over that Zoom call, and then when you meet them in person, you're gonna have them sign it. Okay? If they are remote, meaning they're not located in New York City, you can fill it out for them on the phone, then you're gonna scan it to yourself and email it to them to acknowledge your sign.
Okay.
Okay? But you can't just work for them and not have them sign it.
Okay. And that's, and this is, going to be filled in, well, this is going to be filled when he comes to the office.
Correct.
I'm trying to understand that first substantive meeting. That's, well, that's, after the first substantive meeting, that's when they become your client and they're not just a customer.
When you first meet them in person, then we're not even using customer. We're not kind of defining that word here. We're saying lead immediately becomes client when you meet them. Okay, so they're not really spending any time being your customer in this scenario. They're just going from a lead, which is effectively customer, but they go from lead to client very quickly. Because you're not having much, you're not talking about much when they're your lead, right? When you're starting to talk a little bit about an apartment, you're kind of your customer, and then you kind of need to figure out what your agency relationship with them is and getting that registration and disclosure forms. But what I'm saying is that all just happens the instant you meet them in person during the consultation. So there's not much overlap. It's lead and then client. Cool? All right, that's all I got, guys.
It's a very thorough meeting. I'm not sure if you know the stuff, but it was very good.
The thing is, we just had a whole meeting for an hour where it was a lot of information on something that but most of you are not doing. And most agents don't do. But I think you guys all agree, every point that we made here is something that you would want to know about your clients. And the fact that 95% of real estate agents don't do this, to me, is another sign why real estate agents suck and how it's so easy, and you hear me say this 100 times a day, how it's so easy to be a good agent. You just have to do the little things, which none of this, by the way, was complex. Right? None of this was difficult to understand or understand why it might be important, or understand even how to do it. Right? The toughest thing was, I said, you might need to dig a little bit deeper. You kind of ask off the cuff style question just to disarm somebody a little bit. But again, when they understand that your goal is the same as theirs, which it needs to be, they'll be on board with providing this information for you. But to be working for somebody and not having this information on them, to me, is ludicrous, and it's a recipe for you to spend a lot of time working and not making money, which is exhausting and is going to end up with you feeling burnt out and broke. All right, good meeting. Thank you for coming. Well, come back to my next TED Talk.